She walked onto the training ground in silence. Her steps slow, her eyes calm, the sound of boots and laughter all around her. But none of it touched her. Her name was Elena Ward, 31 years old, transferred only a few weeks ago to this base from a logistics unit that no one cared about. She looked ordinary small in build. Plain clothes, tied-back hair, and no medals on her chest. Soldiers who had been there for years watched her as if she was an outsider. They whispered to each other. "She looks like nobody. She does not even belong here." The range instructor did not whisper. He announced in a loud voice for everyone to hear. "Look at her. She does not fit here." Does she and the soldiers laughed, the sound echoing across the open field. They laughed so easily because she did not look like a shooter. She did not look like a warrior. She looked like someone who had been sent by mistake. Elena did not answer. She did not smile. She did not flinch. She simply walked to her assigned position with the same steady pace. Her silence only made the laughter grow louder. One soldier leaned toward another and said, "She is probably better at making coffee than firing a rifle." Another said, "Maybe she will miss the target so badly that even the birds will laugh above us." What they did not know was that Elena was listening to the wind. Not the words, her eyes were scanning the flags placed around the field, the dust moving low to the ground, the trees bending slightly. She was calculating, she was preparing. While they were mocking her, she was in her own world. The roster had been announced early that morning, the list of names who would take the marksman test, and Elena's name had appeared at the bottom. Many thought it was a mistake. Some thought it was a token entry to make numbers look better. Nobody expected her to even step forward. So when she walked to the firing line, whispers followed her like shadows. This test was no ordinary practice. It was a demonstration that would be observed by officers and commanders. The best shooters had been preparing for weeks. They cleaned their rifles. They trained their eyes. They told each other stories of past victories. But Elena had done none of that. At least not in front of anyone. She came early. Each morning alone, she studied wind directions and drew small notes on paper. She checked her scope by herself. She never joined the loud conversation. She never looked for attention. Her quiet ways made it easy for people to overlook her, easy to dismiss her as nobody, but Elena had learned long ago that being unnoticed was a kind of shield in places where danger was real. Standing out could mean being targeted. Silence and invisibility were survival skills. At the edge of the range, one soldier shook his head and muttered, "This is going to be funny. She will fail in front of everyone." Another added, "Maybe she has never even fired a real shot." The laughter rolled through the line again, but this time a young medic standing nearby frowned, whispered to his friend the name Ward. "I think I have heard it before. Maybe from Raven Post in 19. He did not finish his sentence because he saw the way Elena moved her hands, calm, steady. Sure, not like someone who had never fired before. But his words were drowned in more jokes. Elena reached the shooting mat. She placed her rifle down with slow care as if every motion mattered. She did not rush. She did not show nerves. She adjusted her position quietly as the others kept watching. Some crossed their arms, ready to laugh again. Some leaned forward, curious to see how badly she would miss the target. Even the instructor smirked, waiting for the mistake. But Elena was not thinking about them. She was remembering mornings on high ridges, where the air cut like knives. She was remembering how to breathe when the world was chaos. She was remembering that noise means nothing, and silence means control. She had lived through moments far worse than laughter. She had survived situations where one breath too fast could cost lives. Now the sun rose higher above the field, the air was heavy. The test was minutes away, whispers ran again. She does not even look like a soldier, she should not be here, she is just nobody. Elena remained calm. The more they doubted, the steadier her heartbeat became, because she knew that soon there would be no need to speak, no need to argue, no need to explain. Soon performance would answer everything, And as the last names were called and the order reached, her the ground seemed to still for one brief moment. The mocking voices went quiet. The air grew tense. The sound of boots faded into the background, and Elena Ward, the soldier they thought was. Nobody stepped forward to face the test that would silence them all. The air around the training ground grew heavier as the test moved closer, and while soldiers shifted nervously checking their gear and adjusting their sights, Elena sat quietly on the mat with her rifle resting in front of her. She looked like she had no care in the world, but in truth her eyes were never still. They measured the distance. They watched the flags. They traced the dust moving along the dirt floor. She was not waiting. She was preparing. Some soldiers who stood near her began whispering. One of them said that name Ward. I know it from somewhere, but I cannot remember. Another leaned closer and asked, What do you mean? The first shrugged and muttered, I heard it in connection with Raven Post. Maybe 3 years ago, maybe 4, but the details are blurry. The second soldier laughed, brushing it away, saying, She looks like a clerk to me. No one special, just someone filling space on the roster. Yet the whisper did not die. It spread quietly through the line. A medic heard it and frowned. He remembered a story half buried in official silence about a remote base under siege, a small group surrounded with no hope of rescue. He remembered the rumor that one shot had turned the tide, but he was not certain, and he kept silent while the laughter returned. Elena cleaned the lens of her scope slowly with a piece of cloth, each move precise, as if she had done it thousands of times before she checked her ammunition. Calmly, each bullet inspected like it was a jewel. She drew a small line, on the paper beside her, measuring the wind and marking angles by hand, while the others stared at their digital devices and shook their heads. One soldier whispered, Why does she waste time with pencil and paper? Another chuckled, Maybe she is pretending to look serious. But a sharp-eyed sergeant who had once served on mountain missions noticed her breathing, her hands never shaking her shoulders, always steady. He narrowed his eyes and muttered under his breath, This is not how a beginner moves, this is how a professional moves still. He did not speak louder because the atmosphere was thick with doubt, and no one wanted to be the lone voice defending her. The morning sun climbed higher, the air shimmered with heat. Targets were being placed at extreme range far beyond what most recruits had ever attempted. The pressure grew heavier, and then came a ripple through the crowd as a black car rolled onto the edge of the field. Doors opened, and an officer in full uniform stepped out, Major General. Stone known across the division for his strict eyes and his ruthless standards, the sight of him sent a chill through every soldier. The whispers rose again, some saying she will collapse now, others saying this is going to be her end. How can she stand when the general himself is watching? Elena raised her head for a brief moment, her eyes following the figure of the general as he walked to the observation stand. She did not show fear. She did not show pride. She only looked once, then returned to adjusting her sights. The general folded his arms, his gaze cold and sharp. He had come only to see the last part of the demonstration, the toughest shots, the final proof of skill. He looked at the shooters one by one, measuring them without words. When his eyes passed over Elena, they paused just for a second, and then moved on, as if she did not exist, for the soldiers mocking her. This was fuel for more laughter. They said even the general cannot see her. She is invisible. She does not matter. She is nobody. But invisibility was her chosen shield. She had lived her life in the shadows, because shadows meant safety and survival. Now the whispers about Raven Post returned stronger. Some soldiers remembered that outpost had been cut off by enemy forces' supplies gone. Water low, ammunition almost finished, 11 soldiers trapped and surrounded. One name appeared in that story. Ward Logistics Unit, not combat, not a hero, but someone who had asked for one bullet and taken a shot through a gap the size of a coin. They whispered, It cannot be her. It must be another person with the same name. Yet doubt began to creep into their voices. Elena ignored every word, her focus never breaking. She knew arguments proved nothing. Only actions did. She had learned long ago that silence could be stronger than words, that calm could defeat noise. She had no need to convince anyone, because the test would decide everything, and soon performance would speak louder than gossip. The line of shooters grew shorter, one by one. Soldiers fired, some hit. Some missed, sweat rolled down faces. Breaths came uneven. Laughter turned nervous as the targets proved harder than expected, and then the order came, Elena Ward. Last on the roster, prepare yourself. The field went quiet. The general leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. The soldiers smirked with folded arms, ready to watch failure. The medic clenched his fists, unsure what truth would unfold, and Elena rose from the mat, her rifle steady in her hands. Her expression calm, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment her whole life. She walked to the firing point. Each step measured the dust rising under her boots, the silence growing around her. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if curious to see what she would do. She placed the rifle down, adjusted her position, breathed once, twice, 3 times, then looked through her scope, and in that instant, the laughter stopped because they saw something in her eyes. Not fear, not pride, but absolute focus, like a hunter who already knows the outcome before the trigger is even touched. And as she settled into position, the soldiers realized they were not watching a nobody. They were watching someone they did not understand, someone who carried a story too heavy to be told with words. The air around the range became so still that even the smallest sound echoed louder than it should have. Boots shifting, rifles, clicking, whispers spreading like smoke across the crowd. Every eye locked on Elena Ward as she prepared for the test, that everyone expected her to fail. The targets had already been set at a distance that made most shooters nervous. 2 steel plates, one standing firm, and one hanging loose by a thin wire, both placed 1,000 yards away with barely 3 inches of space between them. It was a design meant to test the very best of the best, a design meant to break the weak and reward only the strongest. Elena lay flat on the ground, her rifle firm against her shoulder, her breathing calm, her pulse steady. She adjusted her position by inches, her left hand supporting the rifle, her right finger resting close to the trigger. The sun burned overhead. The heat shimmered in waves across the distance. The flags at the far edge trembled as the wind shifted gently, left then right. She traced the movement with her eyes marking every small change. The soldiers watching her whispered louder. One laughed, saying, "If she hits even 1 plate, I will eat dirt for a week." Another replied, "She will miss both, and we will laugh all day." The instructor shook his head, a smile curling on his lips, already imagining the mistake that would prove him right. The general, however, said nothing. His eyes locked on her with an expression that gave nothing away. Elena ignored them. All she focused on her breathing. 1 slow inhale, 1 slower exhale. She had done this before, not here. Not in front of laughing soldiers, but in darker places, where silence had meant survival, where 1 shot had meant life or death. Her mind drifted, for a moment, to Raven Post, the smell of smoke, the screams, the pounding of gunfire, the steel door that had held her team trapped with no way out, the impossible gap that everyone had said could not be hit the bullet. She had asked for the single bullet that had changed everything she remembered, the feeling of calm then, and she brought it back. Now, her finger curled gently against the trigger, her eye pressed steady against the scope. The air seemed to freeze around her. Her mind counted the seconds. The wind shifted again. She waited for the exact breath where her body would be still, not a tremor, not a shake. Then came the sound, a sharp crack that cut through the field. The bullet ripped across the 1,000-yard distance too fast for any eye to follow. The soldiers leaned forward, their laughter silenced in half a heartbeat. The screen that displayed the targets flickered for less than a second, then cleared. The standing plate had snapped clean in half at the very center split. Into two perfect pieces, the crowd gasped. But before the sound of shock had even finished, something else happened. The hanging plate spun in a sudden wild circle. The bullet had not only touched it, it had grazed the edge with such precision that it began to spin once, twice, 3 full turns. The wire holding it strained, then snapped clean like a piece of thread. The plate dropped intact to the dirt below, landing upright in silence. The crowd froze. No one moved. No one laughed. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to vanish. For that one moment, the general, who had been watching from the platform, took one slow step backward, his eyes wide, his breath heavy, as if he had seen something that pulled him years into the past. The soldiers looked at each other, confused, afraid. Even one muttered that was impossible. Another whispered, "No human can do that." A third simply stared at Elena as if seeing her for the first time. The medic who had whispered about Raven Post clenched his jaw and said softly that was the same shot. The instructor who had mocked her swallowed hard, his smirk gone, his face pale. He could not believe what his eyes had seen. He had watched thousands of recruits fire rifles. None had ever done what she had just done. It was not just a display of accuracy. It was mastery, complete control of timing and environment. Something no one expected from the quiet woman they had dismissed as nobody. Elena, however, did not look surprised. Her eyes stayed on the scope, her breathing calm. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She simply reached forward, removed the empty shell from the chamber, and placed it beside her, as if the shot had been nothing more than routine. The general leaned toward an officer at his side and whispered, "Words that only a few caught. That shot is identical to Raven Post." The officer's face drained of color. He quickly opened a small tablet in his hand. Searching through classified records, he muttered the name, "Ward Logistics. Raven Post 19. Impossible shot. Saved 11 soldiers. It is her. It is the same person." The whispers that had once mocked her now turned to stunned silence. Every soldier on the line realized they were not standing beside a failure. They were standing beside a legend. Elena lifted her rifle slowly, stood from the mat, and walked back to her place. She did not look at the soldiers. She did not wait for applause. She simply carried her rifle with the same steady pace as before, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But behind her, the world of the training ground had changed forever. The silence, after the impossible shot, lingered across the training ground like a heavy cloud. No one dared to speak. The soldiers who had mocked her lowered their heads. The instructor who had smirked now stood frozen, his mouth open, but no words. Coming, the general's boots pressed against the dirt as he took another step back, his eyes fixed on Elena Ward, as if the quiet woman before him had suddenly changed shape into something far larger, far greater than anyone had ever imagined. An officer hurried forward, his tablet glowing in his hands, his voice shaken as he said, "General, it matches her file. Raven Post 19 confirmed logistics unit. Trapped 11 men, surrounded enemy forces, blocking the exit. No air support available. One impossible shot required. Every shooter refused, except one logistics specialist named Ward. She fired through a gap no wider than 2 fingers. The door lock shattered. The unit escaped alive. Records show it as classified, but the description, the details. It is identical, sir." The general's jaw tightened, his eyes turning back to Elena, who stood with her rifle resting calmly against her side. She had not moved. She had not reacted to the whispers or the shifting eyes. She simply stood there, quiet, steady, unshaken. The general finally spoke, his voice low but heavy with weight. "Sergeant Ward, you saved my brother's life that day at Raven Post." The words struck the crowd like thunder. Soldiers gasped, some covered their mouths, others turned, wide-eyed toward Elena, trying to see her again, as if she was no longer the same person. The general continued, "My brother was part of that unit. He told me once about a shot that no human should have made. He said it was a miracle he never told me the name of the shooter. Now, I know it was you. Elena lowered her head slightly, her expression calm as always, her voice quiet as she answered. Sir, I only did my duty. The general shook his head firmly, saying no. Duty requires miracles, and what you did was beyond any duty you performed when everyone else said it was impossible, and today you showed us again. The soldiers who had mocked her earlier stepped closer. Some with shame burning on their faces, one whispered, I judged you without knowing. Another said, I thought you were nobody, but I was wrong. They looked at her not with laughter now, but with respect, with awe, as if they had just witnessed history in front of their eyes. The general raised his voice for all to hear. Heroes do not announce themselves. They do not shout their names across the field. They simply act when the moment demands, and Ward has proved that again. Today he turned to her and asked, Sergeant, will you consider returning to tactical command? Your skill is needed. Your gift could change lives. Elena shook her head slowly, her answer simple. Thank you, sir, but I prefer to serve in support roles. I have learned that enabling others to succeed is often the greatest service of all. The general studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. Then, will you train our advanced marksmen? Will you share what you know, your calm, your method, your way of preparing under pressure? Elena paused, then answered, Yes, sir. If my lessons can save even one life, I will give them freely. Word spread quickly beyond the training ground, whispers carried through the base, then into messages across units. People spoke of the quiet woman who had done the impossible twice, who had reminded everyone that true skill often hides in silence. The recruits began to seek her out. They found her behind the range, early mornings drawing wind patterns on scraps of paper, showing diagrams with steady hands. She told them shooting is 10% technique and 90% mind control. Your breathing. Master your calm and the rifle will follow. Her classes grew not through official orders, but through word-of-mouth soldiers telling each other you have to learn from her. She does not shout. She does not scare. She simply shows you how to find stillness in chaos, and when you find that you can make the shot, no one else can. One day, after a long session, a young soldier asked her, Why do you stay so quiet? Why do you hide your story? Elena smiled gently and said, Because the story is not about me, it is about the team that lived that day. It is about the people who carried on because of one moment. If they live, then the story is already told. The general left the field that evening, but before leaving, he placed a small badge in her coat pocket. With no announcement, no ceremony, the badge carried simple words, 1 shot, 1 life. Raven certified. Elena found it later. She wrapped it carefully and kept it close, never wearing it, but never far from her heart. Years passed, and her name never filled. Newspapers, her face never showed in public parades yet. Among soldiers, her story became legend, whispered in quiet tones, shared in late-night talks, a story about a woman who looked like nobody, who spoke little, who kept to herself, but when the moment came, she delivered the impossible. And so the lesson spread like a quiet flame across the ranks. The lesson that heroes do not always stand tall or shine bright. Sometimes they walk beside you in silence. Sometimes they are overlooked, dismissed even, mocked until the day comes when everything depends on them. And then with one calm breath and one steady hand, they remind the world that extraordinary power often hides in ordinary faces.